Hello everyone, my name is Gwendolyn James, and today the topic I will be discussing is about raising awareness against sexual abuse in our youth. Before I begin, let me first ask you a question. Do you think that this is even a relevant topic? Is sexual abuse among youth really an issue that is facing the world today? So as you kind of ponder on those two questions, I'd like to just kind of cover what learning outcomes I expect for the students to have in this presentation, as well as my delivery in this presentation. A couple learning outcomes would be students will be able to formulate an in-depth understanding of the concept of youth sexual abuse through the identification of its key characteristics and concepts, all of which will be utilized in developing awareness in the latter part of the lesson. Students will be able to develop key awareness building strategies for youth sexual abuse based on empirical evidences, paired and group discussions, and active learning strategies geared towards employing higher order thinking skills. So, back to my first opening question. Is this topic even relevant? Raising awareness against youth and sexual abuse. Is it relevant? Is sexual abuse amongst our youth an issue that we actually are facing today in the world? If you follow along in the slides that are presented for you, you will see that we are currently on slide number 3. 1 in 5 children are sexually abused by their 18th birthday. So I would probably say it's safe to say that yes, this is actually an issue that is facing our youth today. Evidence would suggest that it is, according to a 2011 research by the U.S. National Sexual Violence Resource Center, 1 in 5 children and 1 in 3 girls are sexually abused before their 3rd birthday. That's pretty incredible numbers there. That is the statistics in the United States alone. In India, more than half of the youth population have experienced some sort of or a form of sexual abuse at least once in their life. In about 75% of cases, these abuses are neither reported nor recognized, and in many cases seen but just ignored. So my next question to you is one that I want you to pause for a moment and really write down your thoughts so that you can reflect back on this towards the end of the lesson. What do these numbers imply in prominence of sexual abuse among young people? What do those numbers really mean? How do they hit home? How do they make you feel? Can you validate the salience of this infographic in your own professional experience and possibly even your personal experience? So take a minute to think about those questions and jot down your feelings so that we can reflect on those. Reflecting on these questions on your own should provide you with means of understanding why the promotion of awareness against youth sexual abuse is relevant in today's time and why it's such a critical issue that we need to focus on. Nevertheless, it should be essential for any counselor to be able to pinpoint certain trends and characteristics that would describe the impacts of youth sexual abuse. So I'll give you guys about a minute to jot down a couple of ideas about how youth sexual abuse makes you feel and how those numbers, 1 in 5 children have been sexually abused by their 18th birthday. How does that make you feel, and what are your thoughts about that? I'll give you a moment to jot down your thoughts. All right, so we'll come back to your answers. Those are just mine, getting your mind working and starting to think about how youth sexual abuse is affecting our nation, not just the United States, but worldwide. So I just want you to start thinking about those. So now I'm going to have you look at slide number 5, and we're going to talk about some verbatim sexual abuse dialogues, and I'm going to have you work with your partner in your area, in your region, work with you in your group so that we can talk about some of the dialogues that we hear some youth say when it comes to youth sexual abuse. I've provided each of you with several verbatim dialogues to analyze and evaluate. Using your knowledge about child sexual abuse, assesses and generate common themes from the verbatim statements. So if you take a look at the first statement. This comes from a youth that made this statement, and I quote, "It never occurred to me that I was already being abused because he only asked me to see my naked body online. I thought it was harmless because I was not being physically touched." That's from Maya, a 15-year-old. What are your thoughts about that? You can write down your thoughts. You can discuss your thoughts with your teammate or your group. But how does that make you feel? A 15-year-old doesn't believe that she was even being abused because it was just online, and she wasn't being physically touched. Here's a second one for you. "I get panic attacks when my boyfriend tries to be intimate. I think this has something to do with what happened to me when I was a child." That's Lorene, aged 19. How does that make you feel? Given your current understanding and knowledge about youth sexual abuse, what are your thoughts in regards to that verbatim dialogue? "I never opened up about being sexually abused because in our society, people would never believe people would never believe you when you say that a guy has been sexually abused by a girl." That's from Clark, age 17. So here you have a young man, age 17, who was sexually abused by a girl, but thought to just remain silent about it because in our society, women don't typically sexually abuse boys. What are your thoughts again about that? So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to think about those verbatim dialogues and kind of come up with an analysis of how does that make you feel? What is your current knowledge base about child sexual abuse as it pertains to some of these statements that are made by some adolescent youth? The conceptualizations that you will come up with will be utilized in a case study in a few minutes as we move forward. So know the accuracy and appropriateness of your responses, and we'll reflect on those and how you respond and interpret the case study as we go forward will help with the overall outcome of this lesson. So I'll go ahead and give you guys a couple of minutes to think about those statements from our adolescent that have experienced sexual abuse as youth. All right, so bring it back. Welcome back. So by now you've done your analysis and evaluation of some of the statements that our youth have made who have experienced sexual abuse as youth. And before we get into your analysis, and before you guys submit that and openly discuss it with the group, we're going to move on to the case study of Amy, and you can see that in the slides. I'm going to go ahead and verbally read it out loud, and then we can discuss it amongst our peers and our colleagues. The case study of Amy can be found on slide 8. And I'll give you a second to get there. Okay. All right. Amy is a 15-year-old who resides in Manila, Philippines. In their community, poverty is a way of life. It is their culture. And people are always looking for ways, whether it be illegal or not, to survive and to make ends meet. Her neighbor, who is also known as Auntie Lorna, is a well-known pimp in their neighborhood who has been in contact with some online child sex trafficking syndicates since 2016. When Amy's mother suffered from a stroke in 2018, the family struggled to find money to make ends and even to pay their hospital bills. The mother was a working mother and became incapacitated and no longer could even contribute to the family monetarily. Therefore, Amy began wondering how could she make additional money. Amy tried to loan money from Auntie Lorna, the neighborhood pimp, who later insisted that Amy needed to return the favor, and thus began the youth sexual abuse in Amy's case. So if we can identify some points of convergence between previously developed conceptualizations of sexual abuse and focus on assessing Amy's level of awareness, that would really help close the gaps on bringing awareness to society in regards to child pornography, youth sexual abuse, and bringing awareness to not just children but families to help keep our youth safe and protected. So right now, I'm going to have you discuss the case with your teammates, and you can draw from previous sections that we've talked about. When we talked about the verbatim dialogues that youth have made, they didn't think that they were being sexually abused because they were, online, they weren't being physically touched, or because it was a woman sexually abusing a younger male child. So we can draw on some of those previous sections that we've talked about, and just gear our conversation more towards a discussion that provides evidence on the limited awareness that is currently out there on sexual abuse of our youth. So for this activity, I'm going to allow you to have a more lengthy discussion with your teammates, about 6 minutes, and we'll return and we'll talk a little bit more about Amy's case, and we'll dive a little bit deeper to discuss how we can work with youth like Amy and families like Amy, just to bring awareness of childhood sexual abuse. So I'll let you guys go ahead and review your notes, the PowerPoints, and our previous reflectives and verbatim dialogues that we've discussed so far, and kind of incorporate all of that into this case study. All right, I'll let you guys go ahead and get started. So it's been about 6 minutes, so I'm going to bring everybody back. You should have had enough time to kind of discuss the case so far, but trust there's a little bit more to the story. So before we continue to discuss your thoughts so far, I'm going to continue on with Amy's case to see if we're still on the right track. Auntie Lorna, where we left off, Auntie Lorna had indicated that she could give Amy the loan to help her pay her mother's medical and hospital bills. However, she would need to repay that loan by way of showing her body online and basically being pimped out. Auntie Lorna kind of diminishes Amy's fear and timidness by telling her that it's just 30 minutes. You won't be touched. What's so scary about that? You just have to show your body to one guy and that's it. Just think about your mom. And so psychologically, Amy, her primary focus is her mother. So she's at a point where she will do almost anything to make sure that her mother's medical bills and medication, hospitalization is all taken care of. So in a moment of desperation, Amy is willing to do whatever it takes in order to satisfy her mother's needs and her family's needs. So in October of 2018, a month after Amy's mother had the stroke, Amy went on her first online sex chat with a German national. She was asked to strip naked and make the guy happy for 30 minutes in exchange for 4,500 pesos, which is equivalent to about $90 US. Amy completed a total of 4 30-minute video sessions with different men. This allowed her to pay her mom's medical bills in full. According to Amy, she says that she doesn't know if this is wrong or not, but she believes that Auntie Lorna has a valid point in saying, I'm not being touched physically and I'm earning money, so how bad can it be? I'm still thinking that she believes that she's not sure if this is right or wrong, or if she should even continue to do this. So I'm going to let you guys get back into your groups for a couple more minutes, now that you have the full picture of Amy's story. And what do you think? Do you think that this is okay because she's not being touched physically? Or do you think that it's still morally shunned upon, or it should be morally shunned upon? And also, does it make a difference that she's in a third world country versus being in, let's say, the United States? What do you think about that? So go ahead and talk amongst your group and see if you guys can come up with an answer. All right, I'll give you guys a couple minutes for that. All right, I'm going to bring you guys back. Welcome back. Sounds like you guys have some really good thoughts in regards to the child online pornography, Amy's case, and you've identified some points of convergence between previously developed conceptions about sexual abuse. I hear some thought-provoking conversations in regards to how can we promote more awareness, and those conversations are to be had. It's very, very vital that we all. I think that's why we're all here today, is to learn more about this topic that we can continue to share and promote, whether it be via social media, in our workspaces, our churches, our local community groups, just promoting awareness. And I am more than willing to share these slides in a more public format so that we can continue to promote awareness of child sexual abuse, especially as sex trafficking is increasing in the United States alone, and also in some third world countries. Right now I'm going to move on, and I'm going to talk about the Playpen. Playpen is known as the online child pornography site that was shut down in 2015. There is still an ongoing investigation of Playpen child pornography website and its members, but it was led to the takedown in 2015. And from that takedown, there are some alarming results that law enforcement agencies around the world have been able to put out through research. When Playpen was taken down, 25 United States producers of child pornography were prosecuted. 51 U.S.-based hands-on abusers were prosecuted. 55 United States children successfully identified and rescued. 296 sexually abused children identified or rescued internationally, and 350 U.S. arrests and 548 international arrests. Those numbers are alarming, and that is just one website that is known. There are several other child pornography websites that are out there that produce even more alarming numbers to focus on, trying to bring more awareness and diminish this childhood sexual abuse that is, plaguing our nation. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there are 8 steps to identifying victims of child sexual abuse. And I think that's kind of where we start our steps to recovery, as this is such a major and critical issue. Step number 1 being the child is abused. We see that the child is abused, where there's signs and symptoms that, not just counselors, but family members and community leaders, if we are part of mentorship programs, we can really focus on our children and identify those abnormalities in their behaviors, in their conversations or dialogues when something has shifted, can kind of help us get to a point where we understand that this child has been abused, and they may or may not be able to vocalize it. Especially in children that are very small, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, very difficult to articulate things that have hurt them. So we as community leaders and role models and mentors have to really keep our eyes and ears open to identify when a child has been abused. So that's step number 1. Step number 2, photos and videos are taken by the offender documenting the abuse. In some instances, when a child goes to the doctor, for example, the doctor will ask you about different bruises, scratches, scrapes that are on a child's body, and sometimes those can even save a child's life just by having those questions asked. Step number 3, child abuse material is shared online. Again, social media is definitely saving lives. We can use social media for good. Step 4, the material is discovered by the police. When things are put out on the internet, I personally have seen children being abused, and their parents will post it thinking that it's funny, not knowing that they're actually abusing their child, promoting the behavior so that other families are seeing the same behavior, and then you have copycat events, and then it's a snowball effect, and then multiple children are affected by behavior that is going viral, so to speak, and maybe the parent thought it was just being funny, but at the end of the day, it's hurtful, it's harmful, and it creates an environment that is non-beneficial to the parent, society, or the child. Number 5, after the material is discovered by police, police record the images into their ICSC database, compare the data, and ask their international counterparts for assistance. Number 6, the network of specialists analysis all above clues that can be drawn from the images. Number 7, the child and or the offender are identified, and 8, the child is removed from harm and the offender is arrested. So those are kind of the 8 steps. If you see, there's a triangular pyramid on the slide provided for you. So now I'm going to ask you to think, pair, and share. Okay, I want to generate at least one awareness strategy that is based on the facts and information presented in the case, as well as through the intelligent utilization of evaluation strategies learned in the earlier parts of the lesson. So again, this next activity is going to be for you to just think, pair up with someone, and then we're going to share back our thoughts on at least just one awareness strategy that we can utilize to promote awareness of youth sexual abuse. You already have your partners identified, so this activity will really just be, you can write notes or you can verbally just focus on the activity, and just, again, I want you to come up with at least one, 2 would be great, but at least one from each one of the groups, an awareness strategy that is based on facts and information presented in the case. I'll give you guys about 2 minutes to discuss that, and then we'll bring it back. All right, so now that we're back, and since we're doing all of this online, feel free to, you can use your laptops to jot down your responses or send them to me via IM. And we're going to do a fishbowl activity. So I'm going to have, I just want 3 representatives to discuss one strategy of awareness that you and your group have talked about and share back with the group. And then I can verbalize it. So if you want to go ahead and send me your responses, that would be great. So if you look at slide number 10, as we move into our discussion, look at slide number 10, you'll see a box that says key issues and strategies on the right-hand side. So any key issues that you've identified with promoting awareness of sexual abuse in children, we'll jot those down, and then the strategies that you and your teammate discussed. So one of the key issues I see here is just being unaware that this is even an issue. That's really good. So thank you for sending that. I would agree. Not knowing that this is even an issue, some people are completely oblivious to the fact that children are even being abused, and especially some of the numbers that were presented today. 1 in 5 children abused before their 18th birthday. That's alarming. You know, you have 5 children standing in a room. 1 of them likely could have been abused before the time that they're 18. That's an alarming number. One of the strategies that I see here that somebody sent in is to utilize social media. Absolutely, utilize social media to, promote awareness. People are creating memes all the time. Just talk about the issues. Creating discussion group boards. That's another one I see here. Create discussion groups about awareness. Let's see what else here. Having focal groups. Having local therapists give presentations in the community as well would help promote awareness. That's a really good strategy as well. And another one I see here is flyers. Creating flyers that are educational and putting them in the schools and giving students a safe haven and allowing them to feel comfortable in their adult supports that are in their lives, whether it be the school, teacher, nurse, counselor, principals. That is a really, really good strategy as well. So I thank you all for sending those in. And so we've shared some of those with the group, and I see some more coming in. But as you keep thinking, and when you go home, continue to write these things down and share with others, because by word of mouth is how we're going to promote a healthy balance of not oversharing or over bombarding like our social timelines and such, but just getting the information out there and getting it out there in a way that it's received and cascaded, so that we can start to help diminish this crisis that our nation is facing. So as we close, I want to ask you, we're going to use the 3-2-1 method. So I'm going to ask you to write down 2 things that you have learned. write down 3 things that you have learned, 2 things that you would like to learn more about, and 1 question that you still have, something that's still lingering in your mind. Um, how can I help solve this? How can I be a larger part in this movement? Um, what country has the highest rate of uh, child sex abuse? So whatever lingering question that you still have, write that down. So again, write down 3 things that you've learned today, 2 things that you would like to learn more about. You heard it, we just kind of covered it a little bit, but you want to learn more about it. You want to dig a little deeper. And 1 question that you kind of still have in your mind that maybe was unanswered or just popped into your head and we just didn't have time to go over it today, if you just want to talk about that. And so just jot that down and we can talk about your responses, and then we'll be done for the day. All right, thank you. I'll give you about 2 minutes to jot those down. 3, 2, 1. All right, so if I can get 1 person just to send me an IM, and tell me something that you learned today. Okay, I see here. Okay. Use Serena says, you found out that it was very alarming that 1 in 5 children are sexually abused by their 18th birthday in the United States, and that it is equivalent to the population of the entire Mountain Pacific time zone combined. That is alarming. I have to agree. I mean, that's almost half of the United States is affected by sexual abuse before they're 18 years old. That's absolutely alarming. So I would agree that was a big, like, wow moment for me. And then, okay, so if somebody else can send me in something they want to learn maybe a little bit more about, we can talk about that. Okay, sure. What are the psychological effects and markers of abuse? Yeah, I would agree. Like, what key characteristics are out there that you can identify that sexual abuse has even happened, or that something is off with maybe one of our youth? Diving more into that I can see how that can definitely be something that you want to get more information on. So the why, the what, and the how questions. How are these cases being addressed? That's something I think more research needs to be done on. How are our law enforcement agencies handling these cases, or the cases that they get tips on? How do they go about identifying if it's an actual case, or how do they keep the child safe while doing the investigation? That question makes sense. What's one more thing that you would want to know that maybe we didn't touch today, or something just popped up in your head? If somebody can send me that question. Okay. So we kind of touched on that. Again, what are the signs and the symptoms of child abuse? That's something that definitely can be researched more and put out there. But I will just touch on it for a second. Share something personal that I've experienced with some of my youth in the school district. Is when you interact with a child on a daily and a consistent basis, and their behavior shifts in such a drastic way. Sometimes it's I believe that it's our responsibility as caregivers, as teachers, to dig a little deeper and invite that child into your classroom, invite that child into a safe space. And whether you use play therapy, I'm a believer of play therapy. We can sit there and play a game, and just to get them to start talking and dig a little bit deeper. those are ways that we can at least try to start the repair, and even dig deep into if the child's actually being abused, or why has this child changed so drastically in such a short period of time. But that works when you work with a child, the same child, on a consistent basis. That's just one strategy that I use. But again, there are a lot of different markers of abuse, whether it be physical abuse, like bruises on their arms or their face, or their bags under their eyes from crying, or lack of sleep, malnutrition. And sometimes these children are very, very scared to vocalize their pain, their fears, and what's happening to them at home and in private. And they're also very, very embarrassed because it doesn't feel normal. So together, I think collectively as counselors, therapists, teachers, community leaders, we all have the opportunity, the duty, and the right to respond, defend, and promote awareness of sexual abuse of our youth, so that we can stop this plague, this epidemic that is snatching children's youth and childhood from them. So again, together, if we work hard to promote this awareness, I believe that we can start to create a safer environment for our children. So I thank you today for listening, for Skyping in and participating virtually, and communicating via I Am with me. I look forward to sprucing this up some. I will gladly take any feedback, comments that you may have for me to improve or get you more information, and that's the purpose of the 3-2-1, so that next time I can incorporate that into my lesson. So maybe those questions won't be asked next time, or new questions will come. So again, I thank you so much. And again, I'm Gwendolyn James, and thank you for listening to my presentation on awareness of child sexual abuse. Have a great day.